everybody. We are now live. How's it going, guys? Let me know if you can hear my voice right now. How's everybody's weekend? How was everybody's week?
How's it going, Quinn?
How's it going, AltshiftX? How was
Good.
your week? How was your week?
Oh man, I'm just trying to figure out these Sisterhood computers. I'm just trying to figure out Anorule, Erasmus. What's happening? I was reading a little bit more of the Great Schools book trilogy that Dune Prophecy is based on to get a bit more context because I think this is a really strange adaptation.
Yeah, I mean, there's some choices being made, but I'm wondering if some of it is going to make more sense as it goes on. Like, I wonder if some of the choices are going to make more sense, like, once we see the full 6 episode arc. So, like I said, I feel like I need to see all of it before I can totally judge it. And that's what I've been saying from the beginning. I can't know, like, what the story is. And I feel like I still don't fully have a grasp on what exactly it is. And my hope is that it's going to lock into place by the end. But yeah. And I was
Yeah,
a little bit, I think I was a little bit in the minority because this episode, for me, I thought it dragged a little bit. I thought some of the flashbacks could have been cut short. But a lot of people in my audience were saying that, like, no, the flashbacks were necessary and they really liked this episode and they liked the flashbacks. So that was interesting. And I totally could be wrong. And I would love to be wrong about this because if everybody else is enjoying it, then great. Like, keep it going. What do you think about it? What did you think about the use of the flashbacks in this
uh,
episode?
yeah. I did find it refreshing to be in a different place on Lanka Vale, to be with the younger actors who I think are good actors, Valia and Tula, and suddenly being in this Atreides place with Tula's murder of the Atreides. All of that was felt refreshing to me to take a break from the imperial politics and the older Bene Gesserit. But yeah, I also find it disorienting because I agree it's really sort of hard to know where this is going. Like this is not like a straight adaptation where people who have read the books know exactly what's going to happen in what order,
Yeah.
because they've totally like scrambled the timeline of the three Great Schools books, and they've cut out most of the plot lines from those books to focus it more on the Sisterhood, but they've also added in these new plot
And
lines
then
with
there were three.
Desmond. So yeah, it's confusing. Hey,
Yeah,
how's it going?
Hey
we
gang,
were
how's it going?
we've just been joined by Abu from the Jabbar podcast. What's going on, bro?
How's it going? Happy to be here. Sorry I missed last week. I was bummed,
It's all good.
but I'm glad I can be here tonight to chat with you all about it.
Yeah, we're just
Yeah,
talking
we
about the flashbacks in the episode. Because I was
Yes.
thinking, for me, I think that I was just a little bit frustrated by the flashbacks because it
Mm-hmm.
was like, I don't want to go backwards. I want to go forward. Like, I need to move forward. And I felt like it was taking me back to stuff that I already had kind of like figured out through context or because I knew the book. But a lot of people that have not read the books or were just like watching it as a normal viewer said that the flashbacks were helpful. And yeah, I'm like, okay, fine. Maybe they were helpful for people that didn't read the books or needed like a more solid understanding on the relationship between Valia and Tula and Dorothea and all that stuff. And I also liked what they did in the flashbacks with the Bene Gesserit having a test to figure out who was loyal and who wasn't, because I just think that makes a lot of sense. But anyway, we'll get to some of that later.
yeah. I thought that was a nice way to visually show Valia's uh, divided loyalties between House Harkonnen and the Sisterhood, because that's kind of like the interesting thing about that character. And having her stand out in the rain like that was a good way of like making it visual and seeing that struggle visually. I thought was nicely done.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting, and I pointed out in my review that I liked the shot of the Bene Gesserit sisters coming down in the rain. It was a nice homage to the Villeneuve movies. The first time we see the Bene Gesserit sisters, I thought it looked super cool with their like robes and stuff. So that was interesting to see. That was neat.
Yeah, yeah,
Even though
very
I
clear
still
like
think,
imitation of Villeneuve.
yeah, but I still think that Raquel's makeup is a little bit questionable. I'm like, I don't care for the makeup. I don't think it looks that great. It's not that
Mhm.
convincing, in my opinion.
It's really puzzling to me because Dorothea in the past looks pretty much the same as Dorothea in. Oh well, actually, yeah, no, Dorothea's only in the past. Yeah, no, well, yeah. See, even I'm getting a bit confused by some of the timeline stuff. But yeah, I very much agree that Raquel's old makeup is very heavy and doesn't look all that convincing. Maybe they should have been a little more subtle with it.
Yeah, and I almost wonder why they even did it unless they're planning on showing some more scenes of younger Raquel. I mean, we had that opening of like that opening shot in the first episode of her like on the field of the Machine Crusade. But I almost wonder why not just cast an older actress if you're not going to show scenes of her young.
I think that's a
So
great
that was a
point.
little bit puzzling to me.
Yeah, the only reason to have all this heavy makeup on Raquel is if they are going to use younger Raquel in flashbacks. And the only reason I can think of doing that is if they want to show like Vorian and some of that like past stuff. Because that's one of my questions. Like, do you guys think that they're going to show us Vorian Atreides? Because they keep mentioning Vorian Atreides. They said that Vorian murdered Griffin, and they said Kieran is descended from Vorian, and Valia wants to get revenge and restore the Harkonnens. And it's like, it are they going to bring Vorian into this?
What do you think, Abu?
I don't think so. Not in any substantial way beyond the name drops that we've gotten in these last few episodes. I think there's so much to Vorian Atreides, and to be clear, that's not the same as saying he is an interesting character. There's just a lot of context around Vorian Atreides that if he were to be introduced, the show would have to explain. And
Yes.
considering we're 3 episodes into a 6 episode season, I don't believe there's time to do that. To
I
introduce a
mean,
whole new huge character.
yeah, because there's his relationship to Erasmus and, the Serena Butler stuff. And there's so much that happened with Vorian Atreides that you would have to, like, talk about and explain, like, why is he still alive? Why is he living so long? There's so much that you would have to talk about. And there's only
Yeah,
6 episodes. So
agreed.
that was part of my frustration. And I'm like, why are we introducing this? Like, are we now just gonna? I'm like, what is this show about? And that is my question. I'm like,
Yeah,
what are we gonna see in these next 3 episodes? What is this completed arc gonna look like? Because I feel like it can go in a few ways because we get set
yeah.
up in the beginning that it's gonna be about the sisterhood and this like threat to their existence in this part of the timeline. But now I'm like wondering, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure exactly what is going to be the conclusion of these first 6 episodes. Is this going to try and rely on like a second season to finish up the plots that it sets up, or is this going to be a completed thing that doesn't necessarily need another season but can have another season if it's successful enough? That's my question.
I do not think we're heading toward a completed thing. At current, especially at the pace that the show is moving, we're halfway through the first season, and we're still doing flashbacks and filling out character arcs and character emotional journeys that really needed, in my opinion, to be done much earlier. We needed this seeded in episode one, as early as episode one, but most definitely in episode two. We needed to get this Tula Valia emotional arc journey completed so that we could move forward with whatever the point to your statement earlier, Quinn, to whatever the point of the season is. Which what is this show about? I don't think the show 3 episodes in has successfully even answered that question.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree very much. I'm stunned by just how many plot lines they've started and they've introduced, but they haven't yet developed. Like they've told us that, oh, Yinez is joining the Sisterhood and she's ambitious, but she has a thing with Kieran, and now it's like, oh,
Yeah.
also there's there's Evgeny and Harrow Harkonnen. They exist in the present timeline as well. And by the way, Lyla's transforming into a navigator, and Valia into that. Like they've introduced all of these plot lines, any of which would be interesting to develop, but they haven't developed any of them yet. And we're halfway through the season. So yeah, I agree very much that this season, I suspect it will feel like the beginning of a season. I'm getting a lot
Yeah.
of House of the Dragon season 2 flashbacks. I feel like this is like a pilot for a season
Yes. Right.
rather
This
than a
whole
full
these
season
three
arc.
episodes feel like the pitch deck to what is actually the show. You know,
Yeah,
it
it feels
like
Yeah.
like an ad for a show that I would like to watch, but it hasn't
yes,
actually started
it
yet.
hasn't. It doesn't feel like it has started yet, which is a damning thing to say, right? When we're halfway through a season, imagine like uh, any other great show. You know, imagine you're like halfway through the first season of Breaking Bad and still wondering what Breaking Bad is about.
Yeah,
You know, that is a
Mm-hmm.
damning thing to say, and I think one of the biggest creative mistakes they've made here, just even stepping out of Dune stuff, right? And like now I'm just talking like media landscape, media industry, TV show industry stuff. Like they seem to be really banking on a second season to flesh out many of these plot points, which my gut tells me by episode 6 we will leave many threads dangling in the hopes that like season 2 will be picked up and then we'll revisit and continue many of these threads, which I just think in the modern media landscape, when you only have 6 episodes to tell a story, you only have 6 episodes to convince, you know, the overlords at HBO to sign your checks and greenlight you for another season. They got to be bangers. You got to rethink your story in a way where you're dropping 6 bangers back to back to back, and this show's just not doing that. You know, they're sort of treating it like we're still in old school 24 episode seasonal TV where we just know we're going to get more seasons and more runtime.
yeah.
Yeah.
It feels
Thank
like
you
they're
so much,
taking
Sebastian B, for your super chat, by the way.
it feels like they're sort of taking it for granted that everyone's going to be hooked. They're sort of taking it for granted that, oh yeah,
Yes.
it's Dune, it's like Game of Thrones in space. Of course, everyone's going to be interested, but I feel like they haven't given us enough of an emotional hook to care. And like, I'm curious, Quinn. You said you wanted to find out like what casual viewers thought of this show because the more I watch this show, I'm like, this must be alienating casual viewers so much because of all of the science fictional Dune concepts that they keep mentioning but not explaining. Like the ending when Lila's plugged into the spice tank with the Anorule computer glowing
Yeah.
blue AI.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, to us, that kind of means something because we're like, oh, neat, she's being turned into a navigator. She's using forbidden technology. But like, I feel like to 90% of viewers, they're like, huh? and and,
I
and like and more importantly, the fundamental purpose of the sisterhood. Like they keep vaguely referring to, oh, our purpose is to evolve the human race and improve the human
Right.
species. They have
Right.
never explained what that means. They have never explained any of the like Dune concepts around like self control and the ideas of the Kwisatz Haderach and they've never explained what their goal is.
Yeah.
And we need to know that in order to care about this show.
Speaking of that, and I don't want to just harp on everything that I didn't like about the episode, but early in the episode, when that one Reverend Mother said, "Perhaps he is touched by the Maker," what what does she mean? Why is she
Oh my
speaking
god,
like a
yeah,
Fremen?
Like a religious Fremen. Yeah.
that was
I
bizarre.
did not get it, and I saw some people in my comment section trying to explain it, saying like maybe this is early Bene Gesserit, and some of them are still religious. I don't feel like at this point in time she would talk to the Reverend Mother in this. What do you even mean when you're saying that? You're
Yeah.
talking to the Reverend. You're talking to the Mother Superior. What do you mean when you're saying he's maybe touched by the Maker? I just did not get why she needed to say that, and I don't think she should have said it. I would
Yeah.
have
Yeah,
been like, clarify.
we talked previously about how like it was weird that the Empress was like talking about Shai Hulud. That was bad, but it's so much worse to have Bene Gesserit using the term maker because like the reason why the sandworms are called maker is because they make spice, and that is a really big secret. ten
Yes.
thousand years later in Dune.
Right.
No one is meant to know that the sandworms make spice until 10,000 years later. And maybe the term maker also refers to sandworms as like a creator god, so maybe it's not just about spice. But even so, Bene Gesserit 10,000 years ago have no reason to be seeing sandworms as like a creator god. That is specifically Fremen mythology, which doesn't exist for
Yes.
another thousands of years.
It
Yeah.
struck me as really odd, and I definitely wondered about it. I was like, why? And I did think there was some other, maybe a little bit confusing things in the episode. For me personally, confusing. Tula, what planet are they on? Are they on Seleucus Secundus or Caladan? Because they mentioned a Seleucian bull, but someone in my comment section said this is Caladan, and these are the Atreides, and that is like the bull that's associated with the Atreides, but like this doesn't look like Caladan. So what planet was that? Do we know?
Yeah, I don't know. That did not look like Caladan to me, because Caladan's
No,
like an
certainly not.
oceany world with, boats and planes and things. That, like, if they're hunting Seleucid bulls, I guess it's Seleucus Secundus. So I guess the Atreides maybe came to Seleucia from Caladan to do the Seleucid bull hunt, I guess. But it would have
Right.
been nice if they clarified that.
Yeah.
Some people in the chat are saying it was Caladan. That it
How do we
was
know that?
How do
Caladan.
we know that it's a
Yes.
forest? I don't think it's anything more than a nondescript forest, and I think Seleucid bull is maybe the only clue we have
Oh,
toward
here we go.
whether or not this is.
It was confirmed in the podcast. I'm so sorry to interrupt. See,
Oh
this is what
wow,
I hate. This is what I'm talking
wow.
about.
Okay, well it
This
wasn't
is like
confirmed
in
in the show, so drop the
this is
ball on that
like
one.
this is like in Game of Thrones when they said, "Oh, and clearly Bran downloaded the Three-Eyed Raven's memories or whatever." And I'm like, "What do you mean clearly? I need to know this by watching the show, not like your adjacent show
Yeah,
podcast."
wow. I
It's
think that's
weird
a visual
because
failing on their part then, because Caladan is known as a water world, and to just show us a nondescript forest, which actually one of our listeners joked kind of just looked like the Wheel of Time season one. I haven't watched that show, but I took their word for it. But yeah, I think that's a failure on their part then to distinguish this as another planet. It's either a failure or just laziness, right? They were like, well, it doesn't matter. Just we're just in this forest scene anyway for one episode. Who cares?
they
Yeah,
did establish the visual language where they have text on screen identifying planets
Right.
some of the time. They have identified
yes.
Seleucia and Warlock and some
Why
planets
didn't they
with
do that?
text, but the first time we go to Caladan, they don't use text. Why
That
not?
what
They established a language and then they just stopped doing it. That does, I agree. That seems like a silly oversight.
That's
Yeah.
such a good point, which is why I thought it had to be Seleucus Secundus, because I thought for sure if you're showing us Caladan for the first time in the show, you're gonna like have a thing that pops up on
Right.
screen that
We're
says
gonna get the
Caladan.
text. Right.
Yeah, and
Oh wow.
we're all guys that have read the books, so it's like if this is confusing for me, I know this is confusing for my in-laws. I know it is. So
While we're talking annoying niggles, I thought it was puzzling how like Chula was teaching that little kid Albert how to lure Seleucid bulls. She was showing him, oh, you cut the poison gland out of the animal and you use it to lure the Seleucid bull. And I'm like, hang on, Chula's a stranger from another planet. She hasn't been here before. But Albert is an Atreides who is part of this culture and I would think has been here before. So how is it that Chula knows how to hunt Seleucid bulls and the Atreides don't? I was like, huh? Like she said
That's a
that
good
her
point.
brother Griffin taught her about animals and stuff, but yeah, that just added to the confusion over like what's the context here? Where are we? Where are we and who are these people? I feel like wasn't
Yeah.
adequately explained.
Wow. I hadn't
thank you,
even
Purple
considered that.
Lemonade.
Good
By the
point.
way, I was just saying thank you, Purple Lemonade, for the gifted memberships.
Thank you, purple lemonade. Favorite color of lemonade.
I do want to acknowledge that folks in the chat are saying they didn't maybe put the text of Kaladin up because it would kind of blow up the reveal that these are Atreides that we get later in the episode,
Yeah.
which I think is fair. But I think visually they still drop the ball because Kaladin is known as a water-rich planet. Not that a water-rich planet can't have a forest, but if we're going to distinguish this as a separate planet, it has to visually look different than something that would just be on Seleucus Secundus.
Yeah, I agree. That must be the reason why they didn't do it. I did generally like the reveal of revealing that these people Tula was marrying into
Yeah.
were Atreides, and the way that they did like the chanting around the fire, chanting Atreides in a similar way to how the Atreides chant in Villeneuve's 2021 Dune movie, and so like seeing the
Yeah,
cultural historical connection there, I thought was actually really cool.
Yeah.
um, you see that there is like a connection over time between these people, and they're playing weird instruments, and it's like, oh, there's an actual culture that we see last into the future. And I thought that this was like, I do have nice things to say about this episode. I don't want to just rag on it all
Yeah.
day.
yeah,
Yeah, me
I
too.
thought that the whole way that they did that sequence was infinitely more interesting than how the books did it. Because in the book, like they go to the wedding of Chula and Ori, and it's just a completely normal wedding. Like, yeah, Ori's wearing a tux, and they do the wedding, and they make small talk. Then they go back, and Chula marries Ori. It's very bland in terms of the setting and the culture, and I feel like this made it far more interesting, far more emotionally effective. I like the stuff with the
Yeah.
horse being put down, which sort of foreshadowed Tula putting down Ori, and it's like there's a lot more like emotion and culture in it that I thought was a lot more effective than the book was.
Yeah. I agree. I actually, as much as I love nitpicking the details of this episode, I actually think episode 3 is the strongest of the ones we've seen so far
Mm.
because we're actually doing some good storytelling that involves characters with emotions and
Mm.
conflicts and arcs of some sort. Because we discussed how the first episode is very exposition heavy, and I was willing to give it a pass because we're entering a new world. You have to set a lot of things up for a new viewer. And so I kind of gave the exposition a pass and the setup a pass, and I was excited to see where things went. By the time we got to episode 2, which I absolutely did not like for a multitude of reasons, but primarily because it was episode 2 was just a lot of plot, 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 plot.
Mm.
Dominoes falling, knocking over the next domino, knocking over the next domino. But we don't know who it was that knocked over the first domino or why they did. You know, there was no like sort of emotional character development at all. And it's here in episode 3 that I think we finally get that. We understand finally that, for example, Tula Valia are our main characters. That these are the two young girls who become powerful sisters and mothers within the sisterhood who we are supposed to invest our emotional time in. Whether we're rooting for them or against them, you know, like we need something from the characters. And I felt like we just didn't get that in the first 2 episodes, and we finally got it here in episode 3. So I actually greatly appreciated it. And I almost felt like this episode kind of came too late. Like this probably needed to be like more episode 2 stuff that we got, so that the impact of all the plot, 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 plot we got in 2 had weight to it, had more emotional weight to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are convincing me a little bit more on this episode because I was a little bit like super iffy about this episode at first, but now like I guess because a lot of the things that this episode reveal are things that I was already kind of taking for granted in my mind, so it didn't necessarily have like the impact for me. But I get why this episode works for a lot of people. And Jojo A says Valia is pretty wicked. We supposed to root for her. You're talking to the wrong person. I've literally seen Wicked 3 times, like already since it came out in theaters. So like, anyway, um,
Yeah,
so
I think that is kind of the strength of this episode and of this story is Valia, because that's kind of what's fun about Valia is that she's the protagonist and she's kind of awful, and her story in the books is kind of about her making the sisterhood into something overly harsh and corrupted by her emotions and I totally agree, Abu, that this episode I think what's good about it is it took us back to basics. Like instead of
Yes.
giving us all these abstract highfalutin sci-fi buzzwords, it was just like there's a teenager, she's on a cold planet, her family is mean to her, she wants greatness, and so that drives her to send her brother Griffin to his death. And then it drives her to send her sister Chula to murderous atrocity. And we
Mm-hmm.
can see, oh, that's why adult Valia is so harsh and screwy and
Yes. Yep.
upset, is because she has this primal wound of her rejection by her family and her causing
yes,
the death of her brother Griffin and her causing this pain to her sister Chula. And it's like, oh, now Valia makes sense. Like I get Valia
Mm-hmm.
now. So I think that's the strength of this episode is that it takes
Agreed.
us with an understandable emotional story that helps us understand adult Valia.
okay.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about Lila a little bit. I think that Tula's relationship to Lila hints to me that Tula had Ori's kid and that she somehow lost that kid and that's why she latched on to Lila the way she did.
Oh
That's
yeah.
what I'm that's the vibe that I'm getting. And also, what do you guys think is going to happen with Lila? Personally, my theory is I think that the spice will wake her up. I think that she may or may not be a red herring for the whole prophecy, like born once in blood and born once in spice. And I think that if she does wake up, that she's probably going to be possessed by Dorothea, who has vowed to destroy the Sisterhood's hope. What do you guys think about that? You guys just think about all that Lila
Yeah,
I
stuff and
I
what the
agree.
potential
yeah,
of it is.
yeah.
I
Holy moly, Quinn! Those are three amazing ideas. You just kind of blew my mind a little. Sorry, go on, Adam.
Yeah, and I actually completely agree, Quinn. Like that's where my head was at with Lila as well. I think it's a bit of a red herring for the prophecy, which the show is very intentionally doing. Right? Is it Desmond? Is it Paul? Is it Leto Do? Is it Omnius? Is it what is this prophecy about? I think Lila is yet. Lila is someone whose name you can throw into the ring for who is this prophecy about. But I actually think what we're seeing is the very first abomination
Hmm.
and the origin point of the Bene Gesserit's then 10,000 year long fear of abomination. This is where they see it happen for the first time, and it's terrifying. And I think Lyla will be taken over by Dorothea, might get up to some uh, painful and bloody stuff in future episodes. But I think we'll ultimately meet her demise, very likely at the hands of Tula. That would be the most emotionally resonant way to do it, I think.
To me, it just makes the most sense, and definitely it fits the book lore because in both cases that we see of like people being preborn or like possessed, it happens because of like heavy saturation of spice, right? So
Yeah.
Chani was on this special spice diet when she had the twins, and that's why they were preborn. And then Jessica underwent the spice agony, and that's why Ali was preborn. So her spice, it just all lines up perfectly to me, and then it also just fits perfectly with Raquel's prophecy. So it just seemed like kind of like straightforward what they were like going for here, especially if you know the lore and you know the lore of like abomination and possession and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Hope it's handled well. I really do like because also that was my impression in the other episode when Lila became when she went into this coma or died or whatever. The way the ego memories kind of crowded her, to me
Mm-hmm.
that rung true with how the description of other memory and possession. You've got all of these voices in your mind. You think the end of Children of Dune, where Alia is speaking with all of these different voices
Yeah.
and these different
Yeah.
languages, and they're all trying to come to the surface. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what they give us. And
Agreed.
Yeah,
obviously, this is
Definitely
going to
that's where it headed.
potentially set up what happens in Children of Dune if they ever do that. But yeah.
yeah. I think those are all great predictions. The idea of Lyla being descended from Tula and Ori uses the ending of the books in a good way because like Navigators of June has this kind of weird anticlimactic ending where like Tula is pregnant with Ori's child, but it never like tells us who this person becomes or what it really means. It doesn't give us much of an emotional conclusion for Tula in the books, I feel. So I
Hmm.
feel like this actually continues that storyline in a potentially interesting way. And yeah, I thought that the most obvious thing to do with Lyla was, oh, she's transforming into a navigator now. Like that's sort of the vibe I got from the spice tank that she
Hmm.
was in. But I think you guys are right that it would be more interesting if she like is healed by the spice gas or whatever, and she emerges as a character again. But they realize, oh, hang on, she's come out wrong. She's actually got the other memories swimming around her. She's like Aaliyah in Children of June. Like
Yeah.
I think that, and yeah, having Chula potentially kill her, I agree, would be a much more emotionally interesting thing to do. I also thought one of the other strengths of this episode was seeing Valia use the voice on people, and it's kind of sinister. Like it introduces this idea that Valia saved Griffin by using the voice to make him swim and not drown, which is cool. But we also see Valia using the voice on people kind of randomly for no good reason. She uses it on Raquella, she uses it on her friends, the young sisters, and they slap each other. And
Yeah.
it's kind of fun and playful, but it's also like, hang on, she's like controlling people. And one of the themes of the books is that the ultimate evil is slavery. The ultimate evil is taking away
Hmm.
someone's freedom. And you don't just willy nilly control people's bodies and minds for gags. And so I like how at the end of this episode, Value's family is outraged and they call her a witch and a sorceress for, making her mother pick up a knife. And it's like, oh, Valia is like toying with dark powers that maybe should not be toyed with. And that's one of the lessons of the Bene Gesserit in general. So I thought that was
Hmm.
another strength of this episode.
Yeah.
And to your
I,
point
I, th- I
about,
think to address the comment from earlier, like, are we supposed to be rooting for Valia? I mean, you do you. You know, that's the point of great stories and great emotional beats and characters is you decide who you're rooting for and rooting against. But I do think we are seeing Valia Valia's place within the Sisterhood, knowing what will come 10,000 years later and what the future of the Sisterhood holds. I think Valia will be a lesson for the Sisterhood of perhaps what not to do, you know, perhaps what
Yeah.
not to be driven by. To your point, Altshift, like she is using the voice callously. She is hell bent on her vision of the future. She is hell bent on putting an empress on the throne and controlling this and having total obedience. You know, she's doing a lot of things that the Bene Gesserit have learned not to do by the time of Paul Atreides.
Yeah, I
So
Oh,
agree.
she's like,
I think
I
she's a
agree,
warning.
but I also think that it it's fundamental to the Bene Gesserit that they kind of have always been corrupt, and it kind of has always been a bad idea to meddle with the
Certainly.
powers that they meddle with. So I think it kind of works either way. Like it works if Valia becomes a cautionary tale and they take a different path, but it also works if Valia is the Foundation. And the Foundation was always corrupt and was always too harsh, and that's why the Bene Gesserit get repeatedly dunked on for the next 4,000 years of Frank's sequels.
Yeah.
that's an interesting point. But I did want to go back to your thing you said about the guild navigator because I do agree that what she was doing with Lyla kind of evoked the impression of a guild navigator, and
Yeah.
maybe they're like preparing us for seeing that eventually. I don't know, but I do agree that it totally evoked the impression of a guild navigator. But the guild should totally exist at this point in time, so they have navigators. So I would like to see that. I don't know.
Well, they've been very. They deliberately have not told us anything about navigators or the
Mm-hmm.
guild, and it
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't shock me if they are changing the timeline and potentially. I don't think it's impossible for them to tell a story about the origins of navigators and the Space and Guild. And I mean, people have been flying all over different planets in this series, which might not make sense if the guild hasn't really been established yet, but I don't know. I'm just not ruling it out, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, considering other things that they're changing around. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be like totally concrete with the established timeline. And like we said, like the timeline between Brian Herbert and Frank Herbert isn't totally consistent either. So,
Right.
Yeah.
we got a
Yeah, I
super
think they're
chat.
playing fast and loose. Also,
Do
shouts to
you
Mercedes, who said Bobby B spotting in this episode was super unexpected. LMAO. Robert
Yeah.
Baratheon. A lot of Game of Thrones actors actually in this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, as well as who is it? Mark Addy, who plays Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones, playing Evgeny Harkonnen in this show. They've also got that kid Archie Barnes playing the Albert Atreides kid,
Yeah.
and he also plays Oscar Tully in House of the Dragon. So
Right.
it's a bit of a once you get on the HBO acting circuit, it seems like they keep you around. It's like
Right. You're on the payroll.
You
it's
know,
like
this
Travis
video,
Fimmel in Raised by
not this
Wolves,
video,
etc.
this episode felt a lot like Game of Thrones. Actually, this felt
Oh
like an
yeah,
episode. Like when people will often say that Dune is like Game of Thrones in space. This particular episode felt very much like Game of Thrones in space to me.
Yeah.
Just because of the way it looked. I don't know, something about it. Especially Lankavel just looks like the North in Game of Thrones.
Right. Right.
We got Winterfell, but yeah, we got a super chat. Do you think Desmond could be a wild Kwisatz Haderach, but like on a lesser scale than Paul? Paul, bred and trained. There are wild Reverend Mothers, and the first Reverend Mother had no Bene Gesserit training. Maybe, I mean, it's a possibility. It's a
Yeah.
possibility,
Yeah.
but the books do kind of hint that like the main reason Paul was able to become the Kwisatz Haderach was because of the genetic work the Bene Gesserit had done up until that point in time. That it like left him specifically primed to like potentially like awaken those memories. So I don't. I guess it's not beyond the scope, the realm of possibility that a wild Kwisatz Haderach could emerge. Maybe that's how the Bene Gesserit got the idea. I don't know. Potentially,
Yeah.
it makes sense.
yeah. I think we talked last week about how like the Dune books are full of weirdos with various powers that don't need to necessarily be explained. Like there's like Shiana who can control sandworms, and there's Teg who is the Flash, and like it definitely helps if you are the product of a million-year genetic manipulation program, but I can totally accept that Desmond is he's just some weirdo who went through an extreme experience. He was exposed to drugs. I think that's all the explanation we need for him having weird powers. And I also would suggest that for all we know, Desmond might be an Atreides. Like, if you want to hear tinfoil, I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if Desmond
Ooh.
is Vorian?
Oh
Like, they
my
keep talking
god.
about Vorian. What if Desmond is Vorian? And like the whole idea that Vorian is
Oh
like
my god.
this 200-year-old
Why did you just say
battle-scarred
that?
veteran. I
It
know.
just blew my mind.
I mean, I don't think they should do this, but it would be kind of amazing if they did, wouldn't it?
I actually do think that would be kind of cool. Like Vorian. Here he is. He's been here the whole episode. And
Yeah.
Vorian
What
is
does that show
already.
tell you?
It fits in a lot of ways because Vorian is already kind of a special human that like
Yeah.
lives an extra long time, and had all these experiments done on him by like thinking machines. It's a whole thing. So that fits. Like no
Yeah.
joke. That actually
Yeah.
totally fits.
I don't think that's as
Makes my-
tinfoil as you're making it out to be, actually.
Yeah, no, it would help explain his powers, and it would give him emotional stakes with Valia. And that's my question about, like, they're doing all this work to establish the Harkonnen Atreides feud. What's the point unless that becomes relevant in the present timeline? So how can the Atreides plotline become relevant in the present? There has to be an Atreides character. I guess it could be Kieran. I guess it could be all about Kieran, but is
Please
anyone
don't let
interested in
it be all
Kieran?
about Kieran Atreides.
Yeah, maybe it's all about Desmond. And I agree. It keeps coming back to that question of what is this show about and what is the central conflict? Because I still think they haven't established what the central conflict is in the present timeline.
Right. Right. Outside of Desmond has shown up and he's scary and causing chaos, I guess.
Yeah. Other than Travis
Yeah.
Fimmel is weird, what is this story
What,
about?
right. What in a larger sense exactly? What is
Yeah.
this story about? What are we
Sorry, we
working
should
toward?
also say, like, chat, let us know if anyone's too loud in the audio. If anyone's too quiet or too loud, we can adjust it. I know that was an issue last time.
Yeah, we haven't gotten too many complaints about it. I think we're pretty good this time around.
Yeah, cool.
Do you think that Desmond might be following the religion on Arrakis that existed before the Missionaria Protectiva? I don't know, maybe. I mean, isn't this... That's the question. That's the question. I don't know. I don't know what myths existed before the Missionaria Protectiva, because by the time we see the Fremen in the Dune books, like, this is centuries of them being manipulated by the Missionaria Protectiva, been under this influence. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that would even look like, really, to be honest.
Yeah, I know the books mention like there's a little bit of the beginning of the Missionaria Productiva is mentioned in these books, but I don't think it exists as like a fully fledged program at this time. But I mean, of course, there's going to be people on Arrakis who have religions, sure. And is Desmond a product of some of that ideology and a product of the environment of Arrakis? Yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Yeah. I also wanted to address, we got a question in the chat from Sky Lounge. How did Game of Thrones establish its main theme in the first 3 episodes? I think it established quite a bit, even in literally episode 1. We established the Starks as our primary protagonists, Ned Stark in particular. We established Robert Stark needing Ned Stark to come back. We established that they have a history. I think we did a lot of emotional foundation brick building in that show in the first couple of episodes, and then allowed the plot to move forward and the mysteries to get bigger and the spider web of everything to get more and more tangled up. And I think that that's the main thrust of my criticism is like, I can kind of give the Dune stuff a pass because I'm having fun just being in a Dune world and, doing the Leo meme of being like, is that Leto 2? What is that? What is that Easter egg? I'm having fun doing all of that nerdy Dune stuff. The stuff that's like kind of dragging for me is the storytelling. It's just like,
Yes.
as a TV show, there are like structural issues with these first 3 episodes right now. And I think Game of Thrones certainly did a much better job in its opening episodes. Was it perfect? No, but it did a better job.
That first episode of Game of Thrones does a lot of work. They even
A lot.
introduced Daenerys and her whole thing with Viserys and being sold off to Khal Drogo. I mean, they do a lot of work in that first episode to establish the characters and connect you emotionally to the characters, and it has a crazy ending. It's a really good first episode of television.
Yeah.
and it's really well executed. And I think that's because they did a pilot and then they had to reshoot it and then like they really like worked it. But
Yes.
and also it's based off of just really
Really
good
great material.
solid
Yeah.
source material. So that's probably one of the big key differences too. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm just functionally like how well is this working as a TV show? I mean, I feel like I can't totally determine yet, but it's off to a somewhat rocky start. I definitely agree.
Game of Thrones in the first 10 minutes, it said, hey, look, there's scary ice zombies beyond the wall, but everyone down south is too distracted by their political feuding. How is Sean Bean going to solve all of this? And oh, look, Peter Dinklage and Lena Headey and Nikolai Coster-Waldau are incredibly charismatic, and Kit Harington. All these kids
Yeah.
are cute. It did all of that work in like 10 minutes.
Right.
And we are
And
3
here
episodes
is
into
what
the show.
what is emotionally driving some of these main characters that we will then follow for 8 more seasons.
It
We
gave us
established that so
clear
early.
stakes and it gave us some really charismatic, likable characters. And I think 3 episodes into this show, I don't think it's accomplished as much as Game of Thrones did in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, agreed.
Which sounds brutal, but again, I still have more nice things to say about this episode, I promise.
Yeah. Shall we maybe list some more nice things?
Yes, I liked the way the computer breeding index looked in the show. I thought it was a cool look. I liked the like veins of blue, tendrils of light, and that to me is just another hint that the eyes that we saw in the first episode are a thinking machine. Everything associated with these thinking machines has blue glowy light.
Yeah,
So when
agreed.
I'm seeing blue glowy light, it's a thinking machine. I liked the look of it, and I didn't totally remember this, but apparently there is a line in the original Dune book where Paul references the Bene Gesserit using a computer. I didn't
Yeah.
even remember that. That totally was blinked from my mind. But yeah, that is a thing that is like referenced like one time, and then it's more expanded on in Brian Herbert's books. So yeah, that is a thing. I liked the way it looked. I liked the whole sequence and the reveal. That was cool.
Yeah.
I also there were some nice shots in this episode. There were some nice shots. I thought the opening shots of Valia and Theodosia walking looked really cool. Like the thumbnail for this live stream of her like looking back was like such a nice composition. How do you say it? It was a nice. The shot was well composed.
Composed, right? Right.
Yes. So the general look of the show I can appreciate. I can appreciate that it doesn't look
Absolutely.
ugly. Like watch the Dune miniseries on Sci-Fi, and you're in for like something that looks really ugly. And I think it's a lot of Sci-Fi to me like looks really ugly. It can be very gaudy. I think they've nailed the look, and I think it continues to look not cheap. So I can appreciate the visuals for sure.
Yeah. And for folks in the chat wondering about the computers, I will say this is even beyond Brian Herbert stuff. The Sisterhood using computers for their breeding program is also Frank Herbert lore. It's stated explicitly in Heretics of Dune.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things that the Brian Herbert books, they keep taking one sentence from a Frank Herbert book and then turning it into a major plot line across a 3 book trilogy. And this is an example of that, the computer thing. I mean, personally, I agree the execution was cool with the glowing blue AI stuff, but personally, if it was up to me, I think it would have been really funny and appropriate if you see the Bene Gesserit's forbidden, secret, powerful computers, and it's actually like a MS-DOS punch card, like old school, like it's the size of a warehouse, and it's got these turning hard disks in it, and it's like,
Yeah.
that's what everyone is so upset about.
Right.
It's like it runs on floppy disks, and you guys are worried about Skynet.
Uh-huh.
Like, what are you talking about?
Uh-huh.
I would have found that interesting because, and again, it comes back to that fundamental problem that so many people dislike about the Brian books is that Brian makes the technology thing about evil Skynet, hyper advanced AI, but that was not what Frank was talking about. Frank was talking about technology in general and our tendency to become dependent on it and our tendency to use technology that we don't fully understand. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's not how I would have done it, but yeah. I did want to say that another thing that I liked about this episode is I felt like the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen was haunting this episode through Valia in a subtle kind of way, because I liked how Valia's family was mean to her. Like her mother Sonia kept saying that, like, oh, you can't even get the right whale fur meat for us, and you're a wolf and you're greedy. And and then Valia like stands up and yells, and it's like, oh, hang on, she's acting like Vladimir does. And all those ideas of greed is all evoking Vladimir. And when Sonia calls Valia a wolf, that's very much like in the Dune books, because the Baron Vladimir constantly compares himself and other people to animals. And it connects to that fundamental theme in Dune of like, we're trying to be human, we're trying to be self aware, in self control. And the opposite of that is the Harkonnens, because they are animalistic and they are greedy and they give into their impulses. And so I feel like calling Valia a wolf and calling her greedy, it alludes to all of those themes, and it alludes to all that Harkonnen characterization. And it's all the more effective because Valia is actually really sympathetic in those scenes. So it's like, okay, we actually are coming to understand the origins of the Harkonnens. They started out as someone kind of sympathetic, but through circumstances, it brought out the worst in them. It brought out their greed. It brought out their animalism. So I thought that, yeah, there is like this subtle connection to the evil Harkonnens of 10,000 years later.
Yeah, I like that they didn't. There's like a trend in you know media and storytelling right now to kind of uh, villain worship, right? Or to whitewash villains, like do a prequel, do a spin-off series that just like
Yeah,
dives into the villains and really kind of
Hannibal.
turns them into admirable, very soft core anti-heroes actually, rather than the villains you might have known them in the original story. To
Yes.
your point, Altshift, I like that we witnessed Harkonnen mass murder in this episode by a
Yeah.
child. You know,
Yeah.
like we aren't going so hard in the direction of making the Harkonnens likable to the audience that we're forgetting that these are the same people that we saw in the Villeneuve films under the thumb of Baron Harkonnen. So I really
Yeah,
appreciated that.
it would have been really easy for them to tell this story differently. It would have been really easy for them to say, look, these wise sisters have the best interests of humanity in mind, and all these greedy, stupid politicians, they don't get it, and they need to be controlled by these wise sisters. Hell yeah, girl power. Like, that would have been a really easy, simplistic story to tell, but they are telling a more interesting story, and a story that is uh, that actually engages with some of Frank Herbert's themes by exploring some of the evil in the Sisterhood. So they are kind of cooking in some ways, and I hope they stick the landing.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to think of like what I can say about this episode because I feel like things happened, but there's I don't have a lot of things to say about the events that happened in this episode beyond what I've already said. Do you know what I mean? Like all I can do
Mm-hmm.
is like say what happened. I don't know. I just
Yeah.
I
Well,
feel like this.
something I greatly appreciated I'm curious to hear both of your perspectives on was the scene where Tula reveals to Ori that she is actually a Harkonnen, and Ori's quite, I thought, poignant response to that. I thought the writing in that scene in particular was quite on point,
Yeah.
and it touched on this idea that feuds, especially feuds that have gone on for this long, kind of are self-fulfilling prophecies eventually. Like they're just like myths, and people
Mm-hmm.
often forget like what we're even supposed to be angry about anymore. And I thought it was a really touching scene that kind of showed us two sides of that feud. On one side, we had Ori, who, for him, clearly this is a thing from a century ago, like he states, right? Why should it matter to my future? I can be part of the change, you know? I don't have to buy into this feud that my family does. I'm willing to forge a different path forward. Versus we see for Tulia, for Tula, it is still a very present feud, right? It's not like a wound in the past. It is a wound that she is grieving now. She lost her brother to an Atreides, and she's still facing the very real and bloody realities of that feud. And I really appreciated getting those two perspectives and just like I guess more poignant and deeper thoughts on a long running feud and just the nature of rivalries and feuds. So I appreciated that a lot in this episode, and I think the Ori Tula stuff resonated with me.
My
I
thing is,
agree.
I do agree, but also in this episode, they do set up this whole thing that Valia believes that Vorian Atreides is the one that killed Griffin, and they don't show what happened, but they like
Yeah.
imply that something happened. So like, are they not gonna show us what happened? Because I feel like that's kind of a blank spot, right? And like we said, they keep mentioning Vorians. I mean, it's almost like I feel like this show almost needs Vorian in a weird way. I'm sorry, it kind of does. It kind of needs. I kind of need Vorian to show up. They've been mentioning Vorian since the first episode. Like one of the first things we hear is about Vorian in this show. So I'm just. I feel like we're gonna get Vorian in some way, shape, or fashion. But I guess we'll
Who's the
see.
funniest actor who they could cast as Vorian Atreides?
Christopher Walken.
Uh, Kit Harington. Keanu Reeves.
No, it's obviously Chris Pratt, gang. What are we doing here?
Oh my god.
Chris Pratt
Chris Pratt with like some like deep
with the
fake
Mario voice.
It's just Jack Black.
Oh my god. Jack Black. Perfection.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Abu, about like the Tula Ori scenes being strong. I think they made a lot of changes from the books to make it more emotionally impactful. Like in the book, Tula and Ori are already engaged,
Yes.
whereas in the episode, Ori actually proposes to Tula right before she murders him, and we see how upset Tula is by having to murder this like lovely romantic himbo. And I thought it was really great how Ori was almost frustrating how noble he was.
Yeah.
Like this is like you kind of get why Harkonnens hate Atreides
Hmm.
because like Valia's like, no, don't you get it? Like we are on opposite sides of a war, and Ori's like, nah, babe, I love you anyway. Like that's not important to me. And Chula, yeah, Chula, sorry, and Chula's like, no, like my brother was murdered. This is a really big deal to me. And Ori's like, no, it's fine. I forgive everyone. And you kind of get like Chula's almost angry that it's like, Ori, you're not understanding how much this feud has hurt me. Like, yes, Ori is being really noble and forgiving, but he's also kind of being, he's not empathetic to Chula's pain. And,
Yeah.
and so I feel like it's, in a weird way, it makes you kind of sympathize with the mass murderer in the situation,
Mhm.
um, which I
That's
thought
a great
was
read on
really
it. Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. You go ahead,
Go on.
Alu.
Well, very quickly, I was going to say, I think another layer, or at least something that I picked up on in that scene, was I got the sense that Tula almost wanted Ori to react
Yeah.
angrily,
Yes.
violently. She wanted him to hate her once she told him the truth, so that she would feel justified in the bloodshed. But it almost hurt her more for him to be so compassionate and understanding. Like that's almost the worst way he could have reacted in that situation.
Yeah, I agree with you guys that Ori definitely wasn't as directly connected to the feud between Atreides and House Harkonnen. Like her brother just died some undisclosed amount of time ago. By the way, how much time passed?
Yeah, I think it's hazy.
Yeah, yeah, that was yeah, but anyway, yeah. So she is a lot closer to it than he is, and I think he had a hard time kind of conceptualizing what it felt like for her because to him it is a very distant thing that's in the past. So that makes a
Hmm.
lot of sense. All that made sense to me.
It would be nice to know, like, who are the Atreides exactly at this time? Where do they come from? What is their goal? And what do they know about the Harkonnens and their feud? And what do they know about the death of Ori? That's all stuff that they haven't told us. So I'm
Yeah.
curious if they're going to actually explain to us what the Atreides perspective is at this time.
Yeah, because a lot of them were just killed. So I would I would imagine that this would, pour some gasoline onto the fuel. Maybe onto the feud that was maybe dying down at this point. I don't know, but guess
In
we'll
the
see.
in the books, Chula also kills Ori's uncle Shanda, and we see Ori working for the Caladan Air Rescue Force, and Ori and Willem and Vorian Atreides fight a sea serpent,
Oh,
and I think it's a travesty that we didn't get to see Ori fight a sea serpent. I think that
Wow.
would have been very funny. Maybe
Missed
we'll get another
opportunity.
flashback next episode.
Yeah.
What do we think the bull represents in this episode? Does it just represent the perseverance of House Atreides, or the fact that House Atreides is not eradicated by this and they will go on because she lets the one kid go? So, is this all of the Atreides, too?
We don't see any
We don't
women?
see any
Many
women.
women, right?
We don't,
Like,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think
that's
I think it's just a hunting party. I think it's
It's
just
just a hunting party.
a couple
Yeah.
of dudes being bros hunting some bull on a weekend.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, we have no idea what House Atreides is in this show. Like, yeah, is it just that one guy? Is it just Albert? Like later we see the Harkonnens saying like, oh, what if the Atreides are going to attack us and get revenge? It's like, are you talking about Albert, or are you talking about like a larger like, do the Atreides are they do they rule a planet at this time, or is it just Albert? Like, I don't know. Be nice to know. But I agree. The bull is a really interesting symbol because in the books, Frank repeatedly uses the symbol of the bull as like the idea of facing adversity, being a matador, choosing to face danger and overcoming it with your wits and your self-control. Paul Atreides facing the Hunter Seeker, facing Feyd-Rautha, facing the Sandworm. That's what the bull represents in Frank's series. And so, yeah, I agree. It's an interesting question. What does the bull mean in this show? Because Chula faces the bull after having overcome the danger of the massacre and while she's giving mercy to Albert. So I'm not sure what the bull was supposed to mean. It reminded me of the White Hart in House of the Dragon season 1, which was like this mystical symbol that was it was kind of like an ambiguous symbol of approval for Rhaenyra in Hot D, and maybe in this context the bull was like it's like approval for Chula's mercy to Albert. Maybe
Someone
that's what it
says
represents.
someone said the bull was there to thank Tula. It's like, thank you for saving me. They were gonna totally kill me.
Camaraderie.
point.
Yeah. Chula saved the bull. She
Yeah.
saved Albert and she saved the bull. And she saves Lyla in this episode.
AltshiftX, turn off the automatic mic adjustment.
I actually just did. I did like 20 minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
I
Never
could
mind
turn it
then.
down. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, audio is a pain.
I know. It's not that bad. It's really not that bad. It's really not that bad.
Okay.
It is fine.
So yeah, sad about no. Loch
Riley in the
Ness.
chat says Ori was hot AF. Chat, Ori, smash or pass.
Yeah, they gave us a lot of shots of Ori's abs this episode. They also made sure to include the requisite sex scene. They really need to tick that box every episode, like clockwork.
We're 3
They
for
need
3 at this point, folks. All 3 episodes.
How would you rank the cringiness of this sex scene compared to the other ones? I think this was the least cringy sex
Least,
scene.
yeah.
of
for
the three
sure.
So far, so I'm relieved for that reason.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. This was the least cringy by far. Definitely episode 2 takes the cake for just like the most cringe shit of all time. But yeah,
Agreed.
this one is the least for sure.
What do you guys think of Michaela? Like, Michaela's the blue-eyed Fremen-looking woman who Valia speaks to. And I like Michaela's accent. She's got like some kind of UK accent. And it made me think about how Frank talks about accents in the books. Frank writes a lot about languages and dialects and how they like indicate who someone is, and you can get insight into people through their accents. And I keep thinking, like, Michaela's a double agent because she's pretending to work with Kieran and the rebels, but she's actually working for the Sisterhood. I keep thinking it would be so cool if Michaela switched accents to fit in and go undercover with other groups.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
like it seems like they're not doing that. But I would love to see the sisters use that language power and use accents, because I feel like in this show so far, like, what are the powers of the sisters? Why are they powerful? What can they do? Like, we've seen that they can fight, apparently, and they
Uh-huh.
have
Truth sense.
and Valia has the voice and they have truth sense. Like, those are kind of the 3 things that the sisters do in this show. But
Yeah.
in the books, there's a lot more to do with like perception and accents and language and seduction and sexuality. Like, in the books, they talk about how Chula seduces Ori using like the Sisterhood's powers of seduction and manipulation, but they don't really show that in this episode. Tula seems more sincere, so it's like I wish they go a bit deeper into the subtleties of the sisters' powers, because this is the opportunity. It's a show about the Sisterhood, so let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's show that it's deeper than just mind control and kung fu.
Yeah.
I really
That's a
like
great point.
Michaela. They haven't shown much of her, but I like the vibe of Michaela, and I hope that we see more of that character.
Yeah,
I, I like the
just the
general
fact
vibe.
that she's the only character in this show who has spice blue eyes, and I just love to know what that signifies because it makes her seem like she has connections to Arrakis or maybe to the proto Fremen, and it's like that's just intriguing. So I hope we learn more of her. But I mean, add her to the list of the like 20 side characters who have mysterious pasts who have not yet been explored. So
That's
Right.
it's
Right.
tricky.
that's a good
That's
point
for
because we
season
were
3.
yeah,
Yeah.
we were talking in the beginning of when we were talking from the first episode, what plot lines are they gonna finish up? Because Theodosia has something going on. The other Bene Gesserit acolyte that likes to mouth off has something going on with her past. All of these characters have like something going on with their past that we aren't privy to. That's probably not going to be answered in the next 3 episodes. Not all of it, probably.
Jen
Maybe
has a secret past. Lyla has a secret past.
it's
Fre-
just
Theodosia has a secret past. Desmond has a secret past. Everyone's got a secret past.
Yeah. I too have a
so,
secret past. I'm not going to tell you guys.
don't we all?
So, do you think they're going to reveal that Griffin was not murdered by Vorian? He was actually murdered by a pair of murderous robot twins from space. You think they're going to do that reveal?
That would be hilarious.
Think we're going to see Hyla and Andros, the android?
I
See, that's what I've been wondering. They cut to like just Griffin being dead, and I'm like, so are we gonna get like another flashback to like what happened on Arrakis and then what happened to Griffin? Like, are we gonna actually see that eventually? Are they planning on showing that? I don't think we're gonna get exactly that, but I do know we're gonna get some Arrakis stuff, but it's not gonna be a flashback, I don't think. But yeah, I don't think so. I just feel like that's so in the weeds and so out there that they're gonna try and simplify it in some way. I don't think they're gonna introduce now more characters to add into the mix and then explain like where they came from and their backstory. It's just so much.
Yeah,
I,
I
I thought
agree. I think there will be a simplification. I think it's intentional in this episode that we just hard cut to dead Griffin and didn't get into how exactly he died. We only hear the Harkonnen side, the Harkonnen version of how Griffin died. Vorian Atreides, conveniently our rival who we hate, killed our beloved son. And I think in a future episode, what that's laying the groundwork for is just like a more of a simplified reveal that actually it wasn't Vorian Atreides and some other thing happened, an accident or a misunderstanding, just to kind of lean into more of this exploration of the feud, I think, between Atreides and Harkonnen and how close it may come to just ending if people just made the right decisions and didn't lean into their darker instincts.
yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
I
that's a good point.
I think that hard cut to dead Griffin was effective. It was also very funny. I think it was almost too funny to be effective
It
because
was
the
too
way
funny.
like Valia's like Griffin, you've got to go and avenge us to save the day, and then just instantly he's corpse, and it's like, oh wow, like it was emotionally effective, but it was almost too comedic.
That didn't go well.
I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on like the Harkonnen family because they've made some weird changes. Because like in the books, the patriarch is Virgil Harkonnen, who's married to Sonya, and they have the kids Griffin and Chula and Valia and Dave or whatever his name is. And in this show, they've made a change. They've split Virgil into two characters called Virgin and Evgeny, and Evgeny is the one played by Mark Addy. And I found all the relationships a bit confusing because Evgeny calls Griffin son, but he's not actually Griffin's father. The father of Griffin is Virgil, which they say at the funeral. And then later in the present timeline, we meet Evgeny with Harrow. And Harrow has the exact same haircut as Griffin, so I feel like some viewers might
So
think they're the
confusing.
same person.
I know,
But no,
right?
they are different characters. And they say that Harrow is the nephew of Valia. So I'm like, okay, so I guess that Harrow is the son of Evgeny, who is the brother of Virgil. If you're confused, I'm confused too.
Yeah, same.
So I don't know. I guess I'm just asking, did you guys also feel confused by those
I'm gonna
relationships?
I'm gonna
And
be
why did they split Virgil and Evgeny?
I'm gonna be completely honest. I did a limited amount of time trying to figure this out. I don't think I really even tried to figure out like what the family dynamic was. I was just like, okay, Harkonnens. So that's, I don't know. I don't.
Yeah.
It was a lot. It was just a lot to take in. And I was like, okay, I'll figure this out in the next episode, I guess. Because I'm like, I don't know.
It was not explained very well at all. I think just
No.
the fact that Evgeny called Griffin's son was so needlessly confusing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, Quinn, to your point, I wonder how much the family dynamics will even matter, you know?
Yeah.
But but then also, I'll shift to your point. If the family dynamics aren't going to matter, why split a character into two different named characters?
Yeah.
And why hire Bobby B into that role? Like,
Yeah.
and have him say sorceress in the voice, you know? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's confounding. But I just feels like it won't matter.
I agree that it probably doesn't matter because I guess like Virgil's dead now, and I guess we won't spend time in the past timeline much more with the Harkonnens, but yeah, it was a bit puzzling. I did enjoy Evgeny's return in the later timeline, and he's looking like the Baron Vladimir, like
Yeah.
he's in the dispenser
Yeah.
chair and he's going bald, and so that again I think brings up that sort of ghost of Baron Vladimir haunting this episode, which I think is one of
Actually,
the strengths.
actually did like that ending scene. What do you guys think of Valia going to House Harkonnen? Because of course she's trying to maintain the Bene Gesserit's influence over the great houses of the Landsrat, and since I guess she has this direct connection with House Harkonnen, why not start with them? So what do you guys think is going to be the result of this? Because they seem pretty shocked to see her. They're like, "Oh wow, this is a surprise that you're here after what you did."
Yeah. I will say it's quite on brand for a millennial to go back home after losing their job
They want they want the
during a
truth sayer.
recession.
That's the thing too. They want the truth sayer, right? They've been begging for the truth sayer.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
reinforce us with the great houses of the lands, right? And we'll hook you up with this truth sayer. Just have the Bene Gesserits back. So I think that's maybe what we're seeing here.
There was a lot of awkward Thanksgiving reunion energy in that scene, wasn't there?
Yeah.
I,
For
I,
sure.
um, I, what do I think? What was I going to say? Oh, you guys go. No, well, no, I don't know what I was going to say. Like on the way to that meeting with Evgeny, Valia says, "We must make sacrifices. Sacrifices must be made," and then she faces Evgeny and Harrow, and Valia is not being warm to them. So it kind of made me feel like, is Valia going to do something messed up to these people? Is she going to sacrifice Evgeny in order to take power and control over House Harkonnen, in order to make House Harkonnen strong again? Because like we know that Evgeny does not like Valia. He blames her for everything that's gone wrong. So maybe Valia's gonna like kill Evgeny so that she can work instead with Harrow, who might be more amenable to working with Valia, and because we know that Harrow has a master plan to make House Harkonnen powerful again by selling immense quantities of whale seed. So we know that Harrow has ambition and Evgeny does not. So Valia's like, hey, you got seed, I got sisters, let's make this happen, Like maybe they're gonna work together. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what's going on.
It's good for your skin. Look at this guy in the chair. Look at his bald head.
You
Whale
need
seed.
skincare, Evgeny. But also Theodosia is there. Theodosia is there, and Theodosia, they're really investing in Theodosia and her mysterious past and her mysterious quote unquote circumstances. So I wonder if Theodosia has a personal connection to House Harkonnen, because Theodosia has to have a
Mm,
connection to something. We don't know what's going on with Theodosia. It's got to be either she's got a Harkonnen connection, or she's a Atreides, or she's got an Imperial connection. It could be that she might have something to do with the Harkonnens. I don't know.
yeah. I think we can be absolutely sure of one thing. Volley is not going back for help. I think she's going back to scheme. These are
To
perhaps
scheme.
the only people in the moment that she knows she can move around on the chessboard. And so I don't think she's giving dinner table with her family being nice and asking for support. I think she's going to be here manipulating them.
Well, of course. I mean, that just comes with like even if they're ostensibly helping you, they're manipulating you. Like everything that they do is a form of manipulation. Like that's just
Yeah,
a given for sure.
definitely.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting question though. Like in the books, Valia does not have this negative conflict with the Harkonnen family. Like Virgil and Sonya are a lot more passive. And Valia just sort of wants to help House Harkonnen. But in this show, they kind of hate each other, which sort of complicates Valia's motivations because her motivations are meant to be she wants to help the Sisterhood, but she also wants to help the Harkonnens. But the Harkonnens hate her. So it's really important, that relationship between Valia and the Harkonnens, is what I'm saying. So I'm, yeah, really curious what this meeting is going to be like. And I know that some of the creators of the show have said that next episode, Harrow, the young Harkonnen, is meant to be really kind of interesting and
Yeah.
scene stealing. So yeah, I'm really curious what they do, and I think it's really important what they do because this is key to the main character's motivation, Valia.
I will say another thing that I did like about this episode is that it kind of shows the definitive moment that Valia chose the Sisterhood over House Harkonnen, which I feel like that is more vague in the book. I don't even know when or if that happens, but yeah, I liked seeing that. I feel like that made sense and that we needed to see that because I was wondering when that break happened, when she decided that it's sisterhood above all and not I'm gonna
Yeah.
always look out for House Harkonnen. So that was nice to see, and I liked seeing that for sure.
Yeah. And
And
the
I,
motivation for her to undergo the agony solo, I thought that was
Yeah,
a very striking moment.
you don't
Given what
come
we know
back.
about the agony.
Yeah, you don't come back unless you come back a Reverend Mother. I thought that was a real good moment too because it's
Yeah.
different from what happens in the book. Because in the book, it's a whole thing where no, we talked about it, but it's different, and I do like this version of events better. I do think this is a superior retelling of those events, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
points
I
for
think
that.
in almost every way they've improved the plot from the book, the parts that they have adapted. And I liked how Raquella played a role here. Like I like how Raquella was basically like, yeah, I see you, Valia. I see that you care about the Harkonnens, and I see that you're not fully committed to the Sisterhood. But I still love you anyway. Like I still see the potential in you, and I still see you like a daughter. Like we were talking how in the previous episodes, Valia said that Ricola was like a mother to her, and we were like, oh, but we haven't seen it yet. Now we've seen it, and I
Yeah.
think they have successfully established the connection and the love between Raquel and Valia. And I think we've established how it's heartwarming, but it also compromises the sisterhood because it goes against their values of being like purely rational and not emotional, and that again is one of the key themes of the sisterhood in the books. So I thought that was effective, and also like the rivalry between Dorothea and Valia for Raquel's approval and for advancement in the sisterhood. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like the sisterhood is a family, but it's also a political organization where you're like competing with your co-workers to rise up through middle management, and it's like, and it's also a religious organization, and it's like, so there's like a lot of things going on in this complicated family full of drug-addled witches. So
This
Yeah.
I enjoyed
Yeah.
that.
I really
those were
enjoyed the one-on-one Raquella had with Valia
Yeah,
after she's out in the cold. I thought there was actually some in the writing some really great thematic elements from the Dune in general, from the Dune books, kind of weaved throughout. In
yeah,
particular, the exact quote is escaping me, but Raquel says something along the lines of, "We we discovered that adversity is what creates change," and
mm-hmm.
that is that's a simplified definition of Amtal, basically the idea that you push something to a breaking point,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then that is when true evolution and change happens. So I really liked the Raquel and Valia relationship throughout the episode.
I agree
Yeah,
with
I
you
think
guys, and I also think that Raquel is definitely taking a risk, right? By like accepting Valia because she's kind of a wild card. She can see that she has this innate kind of talent, but she's definitely taking a risk because she doesn't know if Valia is going to fully commit to the sisterhood. So by even allowing her in, she's taking a risk
Yeah.
that could potentially endanger the future of the sisterhood. And that's kind of what we talked about too in a couple live streams ago, maybe in the last one, is that the Bene Gesserit often act based on emotion. Like throughout the entire series, they often act based on emotion. Like I mean, they have outward emotional control, but a lot of times things that they do are motivated by just what they're feeling. Because at the end of the day, they don't move beyond their humanity. They never take that step past humanity, and I think that's important too. They get close sometimes, but never fully across the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fundamental paradox at the heart of the Dune books is that you've got to be a rational, cold, calculating badass to survive, but also the only point in living is loving. And that's what the sequels are so much about. And yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, is Raquella just like accepting Valia because she likes her, or is to some extent Raquella deliberately kind of manipulating and pushing Valia because she knows that this powerful young woman has potential? It kind of reminds me of like Adrade and Mabella in like the Heretics and Chapter House books, because
Yeah.
it's that acknowledgement that like the Sisterhood wants to be pure and rational, but also you need to throw a wild card in there because you need a change and you need a bit of chaos in order to survive. So I again feel that this show is borrowing some of the interesting thematic elements from Frank's books to kind of add some meaning to what could otherwise be a kind of bland story.
I agree, and I do think that it's both. I think that
Yeah.
she does recognize her innate power, but she also cares for her to some degree, and it's a mix of both for sure. Someone
Yeah.
says, "Do you think they are setting up Raquel to come back as a goat?" I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that we might hear Raquel again through Lyla, because that's a thing with possession. It's not always necessarily one ego memory. Sometimes it's multiple. So I don't put it past this show that maybe at some point uh, Raquel speaks through Lyla. That could happen potentially. So I don't think she's a goal though. I don't think that's happening. What do you guys think?
No, I don't think so.
No golas.
I thought that Chula's reluctance to kill Lila was well done, and I thought even just like the prop, just like the breathing apparatus that they put on Lila when she's like sitting
Mm-hmm.
there comatose and this machine is like helping her breathe. It was a very simple prop, but I think it was really creepy and tender. The way that they did that, I thought was really lovely, and like the older sister Avila, telling her kind of harshly that no, there's what we do. We kill kids here. Get over it. And it's like, oh damn! Like that whole conflict, I thought was really disturbing and effective, and feeds into all those themes we were talking about the sisterhood not being allowed to love. So
Yeah. I
I
did
thought
like,
that was
speaking
good.
of Sister Avila, I did like that relationship kind of came full circle at the end of the episode when
Yeah,
all the sisters are gathered to say
I
their
was just
final
about to mention that.
goodbyes to Lyla. And Jen obviously gets very critical and voices her opinion against Tula and wonders what the point of any of this was. Why did Lyla have to die here? And Avila jumps in, sort of in a defense of Tula, and kind of explains pretty well, I think, that this sisterhood is based on the sacrifices of our fellow sisters like Lyla, and we honor their memories by continuing on with our mission. And everyone here has made sacrifices, including Sister Tula, and we all need to recognize that. So I did like that there was that sense of camaraderie there as well between the older sisters.
I personally found that whole thing to be one of the most effective scenes in the whole movie. I mean, in the whole episode. Uh, yeah, I really like more stuff like that. I feel like these are the things that define the sisterhood and what they are.
Yeah,
They sacrifice. The individual doesn't matter as much as the greater whole, and I think that we need to reinforce like what is the sisterhood and what makes them what they are. And I think this scene helped towards that. Even though I do need more, but I really did like this scene. And I felt it felt emotional in the right ways, and it was well acted. And like you said, I like having the character Jin because we need someone that's gonna like kind of push back against I don't know what the sisterhood is doing at that time,
yeah,
and kind of to like give like I guess the opposite, devil's advocate take on it. So I really it was an effective scene for me. It really worked.
yeah.
So It was
Plus,
good.
Yeah,
don't
I
forget
mean,
that Sister Jen has a secret
She's got a secret.
backstory.
She may or may
I,
not have killed her parents. So we'll see.
Jen, what if Jen killed Lila's parents, who were
Hello.
also Theodosia's? All right. So I thought Jen was very similar to young Valia because we had that scene where young Valia was at Sisterhood class and Dorothea was being like inexplicably mean to her. Like Dorothea was saying, "Hey Valia, you're so like lonely and angry, you loser. You should leave the Sisterhood." And again, I was kind of like, is she testing her? Like, are they deliberately pushing Valia because they see potential and they want to like just push her to see how far she goes? But I mean, Jen also is similar, where she has these sort of moral objections and she has this rebellious spirit. Um, so yeah, I'm really curious where they land at the end of all this in terms of the Sisterhood schism. Like, are the rebellious, emotional, Jens and Lilas going to succeed over the, conservative, harsh sisters? I'm curious to know because I feel like Avila's death is going to be like the death of the hardline conservative sisters potentially.
I think in
Um,
The
episode
boomers.
1, Tula compares Jin to Valia, right?
uh, does she?
That sounds familiar when they're going over the girls and like all the young acolytes. I think Tula compares Jin to young Valia, and Valia says something like, I forget exactly what she says, but that sounds right to me. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, that's one of the consequences of these time skips. It sort of has this Game of Thrones House of the Dragon energy where everyone's related to someone and everyone's inheriting conflicts from the past. The Atreides and the Harkonnens are continuing their intergenerational feud, and so it becomes about like what do we inherit from the people who came before us? What do we continue on? Can we reject the legacy of our forebears? Can we make something new? Are we repeating patterns? Does history repeat itself? Those are all some of the interesting themes that they can do because of this flashback structure that they're doing. So and yeah, like I'm sure there will be reveals about some of these young characters secretly being the children of other characters, and that could all serve those themes potentially.
Okay, it was about Jim. It was about Jin not being tameable. Like Valia says, "Oh, when have I? When was I ever tamed?" Or something
Right.
like that. That's what
Mm,
Yeah.
it is. That's what it is. So they are trying to make that comparison for sure. That exists.
Hmm. Did you guys see Valia hearing other memories when she was hearing these voices that were saying this might happen or that might happen? Adult Valia when she was just before she talks to Michaela. I thought that was good. We were talking about how we need some exploration of the memories.
Yeah, that was cool to see. That was cool to see. I liked all. I mean, not all of. I liked a lot of the main timeline Benny Gesserit stuff this episode. It was cool. And like I said, the flashbacks are growing on me. I need to probably watch this episode again without my bias so I can see the whole thing again and maybe I will like some of the flashback stuff more than I like it my initial viewing. So,
Hmm.
yeah. What's funny and like maybe feels like a bit of a hot take to you, Quinn, is like I kind of like the flashback stuff more than the present day stuff. We got no Desmond, Carino, Kieran Atreides in this episode, and I didn't miss it one bit.
Yeah.
Like if this show like honestly to me it feels like there's another great show buried in here somewhere that we saw a glimpse of
interesting.
in episode 3 that is more focused, more honed in on our two main characters, these two sisters with family drama and family baggage. And it's a show about a Harkonnen come up. It's a show about these sisters finding and embracing their power, overcoming their grief and trauma, and growing alongside like a sisterhood that's just coming on the scene and beginning to exert its power upon a young baby Imperium. Like that to me almost would have been a more focused and forward moving and interesting and emotionally impactful show rather than sort of like the Game of Thrones in space that we're getting in the present timeline. So um, I walked away from this episode thinking like, dang, there's maybe another better show buried in here somewhere, and we saw it here in episode 3.
In a way, I kind of agree with you, but I guess I was just trying to kind of reconcile my idea of what I thought this show was going to be with like what I'm actually seeing, and I just need to like accept it for what it is and just like see it. But I do agree, like a lot of what we saw in the flashbacks was more focused. It did a lot more to develop the characters and the relationships between each other. Um, I think I just had a problem with the fact that it's more of the show itself. You know what I mean? I feel like it's not committing. I feel like if you're gonna show
Absolutely.
me
Oh
these
yeah.
scenes, like I need more space. I need to see more. I need to be able to connect to these characters because I'm seeing dead Atreides, but like I don't emotionally care. You know what I mean? I
Yep.
don't care because you just introduced these characters and these people to me. So it's just like decide what show you're gonna make. I just do they have the time to even do this story? I don't know.
Yeah, here's how the pitch meeting went. Like, the writer came into the room with the executives at HBO, and they're like, "Okay, I've got three different ideas of a Dune show. Choose one of these three options. I've got a great story about imperial politics where Princess Yinez joins the Sisterhood, but really she's trying to help the Emperor Yaviko. Or the second option is that we explore the origins of the Sisterhood, and we show how, like, they become Reverend Mothers, and the first Reverend Mother, Raquella, and how that passed on to Valia. Or the third option is that we just put Travis Fimmel in Arrakis, and he takes drugs, and he's just really charismatic and inscrutable." And the
Yeah.
executives were like, and so the writer's like, "Yeah, which of these three options do you want?"
Uh
And
huh.
the
Uh huh.
executives say, "Yes, we'll do all of them." And the writer's
Right.
like, "No, no, I mean, we have to pick one of these three shows. We can't do all of them." And the executive's like, "No, we're doing all of them.
Yeah.
This needs to be the next Game of Thrones. It's Game of Thrones in space, right? I haven't read Dune, but I heard it's like Game of Thrones in space. So let's just put everything in there because we need the worms, we need the Emperor, we need the sisters, we need Travis Fimmel. Throw it all in." And then the
Yeah.
writer's like, "How do we include all of these things? It just feels overstuffed." And then they probably wrote a 10-episode season. And then the executives were like, "Oh, by the way, this is now a 6-episode season.
Right.
Sorry, you're going to have to cut it down." And they pulled their hair out and they're like, "Oh, we have to restructure the whole thing." That's kind of how it feels to me. I don't know
Certainly.
if that's exactly what happened, but I feel like they had three different options and they're trying to do all of them at once. And I
Yeah.
totally agree that I care so much more about young Valia and young Tula than I do about bloody Constantine and Kieran and Yaviko. Like, those guys are so much less interesting than these young sisters, and I wish they had focused the show on the part that was interesting.
Yeah. Which is a damn shame because that third pitch you laid out is practically raised by a new season of Raised by Wolves, which I think we all would have loved to see.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe season 2 of this show is just going to be Raised by Wolves.
Well, I'm hoping we do get another season of this show, Kim King. We're hoping.
I,
Here's
Yeah.
hoping.
Genuinely. Genuinely.
Like genuinely, that's the thing too. I don't want everyone to think that we're just like hating just to hate. All three of us want this show to have a second season. We want it to end well.
Absolutely.
We want it to be successful and for them to continue making Dune shows and for it to be great. But you know, some of the creative choices that they're making with this show don't lend themselves to a long-lasting television show that's going to be successful in our current climate of media. I'm just saying.
Yeah. You know, I had a
yeah,
question. Somebody in chat said, I want to shout out who they were. A. Parker asked if Valia drinks a cup of spiced tea every day, why doesn't she have eyes of the Abad, the blue
All
eyes?
of these are good questions.
I
Good
That was my
question.
first thought. I was like, one cup of spiced coffee a day is a lot of spice.
You should have
yeah.
the eyes of the of Ibad. You absolutely should. So why is Mikhail the only one that has them? I get that she's on Arrakis, but they're all consuming spice. So in fact, it's like we've been talking about. More people just in general should have the eyes of Ibad unless they're wearing contacts, but they haven't addressed it. So I don't know. That's even
It,
true in the Villeneuve Dune too. So
Decaf
I don't know.
spice.
yeah, in my opinion, the blue eyes of the Abad are inconsistent in Frank Herbert's books. Like, Frank never really explains what circumstances give people the blue eyes and what don't, and Frank never even explains who has blue eyes and who doesn't. Like, I think in, like, the second book, Frank mentions, "Oh yeah, Gaius Helen Mahayam. Yeah, she had blue eyes the whole time. I just didn't mention it until now." Um, and he never really tells whether the Emperor has blue eyes. Like, you would think the Emperor should have blue eyes because he takes enough spice that he lives longer, but it never mentions if he has blue eyes or he wears the contacts. In my opinion, the best interpretation I can make that makes sense is that in order to get the blue eyes, you actually have to live on Arrakis. Like, the Fremen have blue eyes because they live on Arrakis, and the entire environment and all of their food is saturated with trace amounts of spice, and that gives them the blue eyes. If you just like take spice recreationally, as a lot of people do around the universe, you don't necessarily get the blue eyes. Pinter de Vries does have blue eyes because he takes enough spice. So if you regularly take enough spice to get addicted, you can get blue eyes, but not necessarily is my interpretation, because I think there are some
Yeah.
people who take some spice but don't get the blue eyes. So it depends on the dose and it depends on your environment. So like to
So
me, based on my interpretation, I think it is plausible that people like Michaela have the blue eyes if they have spent years and years and years living on Arrakis. And I think it is plausible for people like Raquel and Tula to not have blue eyes because they just take some spice, but not enough to give them blue eyes. That's my
Yeah.
blue eye rant.
Yeah.
so perhaps the key is not necessarily spice addiction, but spice saturation. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Well, guys, it's getting late over here on the East Coast, so I'm gonna bounce. But this was a blast as always. Love chatting with
Sweet.
you both, and hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, this
Absolutely,
was
bro.
great. Thanks for
All right,
coming and chatting.
not a problem.
Thanks for
Thanks,
coming
y'all.
on.
Bye bye.
See ya.
So, and then there were two.
And then there were two. I think I've still got a few more little things I want to chat about. You good to keep
Sure.
going?
Yeah.
I thought that I just like I've been reading a bit more of the books that this is based on, and there were a couple of moments that I really liked. Like when I saw Valia hearing the other memories in this episode, I thought about there's a bit in the books when Valia is having like a conflict with her other memories, where the other memories are like disapproving of the way that she's leading the sisterhood. And the
Mm-hmm.
other memories, all the ancestors in her head, they're like, hey, if you don't do the right thing for the sisterhood, we could destroy you. We could drive you crazy. We could make you kill yourself. We could possess you like an abomination. But Valia manages to get control over her other memories by going like totally nuclear. And Valia threatens to kill every Reverend Mother and herself in order to wipe out and erase the other memories completely. And I found that shocking and
It is
so
shocking.
intense, and it characterizes Valia as such like an intense, brutal character. Almost reminded me of like Leto the Second, the God Emperor, with like the intensity of his control. And it just really stuck out to me as something that was actually quite effective in the books. And so it gives me more hope that I hope that they explore the other memories more in this show.
That's part of my question too. Like, is this version of Valia as savage as the book version? I'm not entirely sure yet. I think that remains to be seen. But yeah, the concept of other memory is something that I would love to see being explored more because it definitely seems like something that could be quite scary. I mean,
Yeah,
they talk about like being a baby and being possessed with the other memories, but I can only imagine that it's scary as an adult too because now you have all of these other personas in your head speaking to you. It's like weird schizophrenia, except they're your ancestors telling you to do things, threatening you in weird ways. Yeah, that is definitely something that I'd like to see more of. I think was it you that mentioned in our other live stream that wouldn't it be cool if like we get the reveal in this show that like constantly inside of the Reverend Mother's mind there's this war between the other memories and herself where she's constantly keeping them at bay and that is just what
yeah,
it is to be a Reverend Mother. This is just how they exist. This is the price that they pay for this power. I think that could be a really scary way to show it. But yeah, that
yeah.
is cool.
I did find like we saw this episode Valia taking the poison, going through the agony, becoming a Reverend Mother. I thought that was underwhelming because like I liked how when Lyla did the agony, it was really intense and it changed her and it was dramatic. But Valia just like she did the agony and she didn't seem changed afterwards, and she didn't mention having other memories. Like I really feel like if you're going to show someone take the agony and become a Reverend Mother on screen, you've really got to give us more than that. Like in the books, it actually is quite effective. Where at the end of the Sisterhood of June book, Valia takes the poison, and then that's the end of the book, and
Hmm.
that's like a really dramatic cliffhanger. And I feel like that is more effective than what this episode showed us, which was like, oh, she does the agony and then she's okay. That's like, come on, like she's meant to have like journeyed into the infinite and
Yeah.
reclaimed herself, and it should be more than that. I feel.
I think the reason probably that they did it like that was because they had just shown an agony in the other episode, so they were just kind of like, let's just cut past this real quick. There's a lot of little decisions like that in the making of like a TV show that can either like diminish or improve the story. And I think in this case, it does diminish it a little bit. And I think that I don't blame them for not showing it since we did get that whole sequence with Lyla in the second episode. But I do agree that it is not effective as the ending of Sisterhood of Dune.
Hmm. I
I
wonder if
do
we'll
agree.
see Tula's agony because have they even explicitly said that Tula is a Reverend Mother? I'm not sure if they have, but
I don't think so. They haven't said specifically who is except for Vol, yeah. They've mentioned Reverend Mothers, plural, so we know that there are more of them. And I guess we're meant to maybe assume that she is one, but it's not 100% clear to me.
that is another criticism is that like the Reverend Mothers are meant to be superhuman beings that everyone is in awe of. It should be obvious who is
Yeah.
a Reverend Mother and who is not. Like that's something that Villeneuve's movies captured really well. Like you see Reverend Mother Guys Mahayim and everyone's like, "Oh damn, like this isn't playtime anymore. Like there's a Reverend Mother in the room. This is serious." Whereas here you don't have that same sense of gravity and you don't have that sense of distinction between the Reverend Mothers and the regular sisters. But yeah, like I am curious if they might do more flashbacks and they might show us Chula's agony because Chula is someone who has changed. Like she went from someone who is willing to mass murder people, including her boyfriend, and now she's someone who she seems to have evolved and she's gone through decades, and the agony could be part of the change that she's undergone. So yeah, I'm curious about that.
Someone says, "Isn't everyone with a veil a Reverend Mother?" I don't know. They're truth sayers for sure, but Reverend Mother is a very specific thing. You have to have underwent the agony to become a Reverend Mother. So
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't.
yeah, I think that's kind of the language they imply in the Villeneuve movies when Gaius has the veil. Although there are other veiled Bene Gesserit in the Dune movie, so I don't think are necessarily Reverend Mothers. That is another confusing thing is that like okay, there are regular Bene Gesserit and there are Reverend Mothers, but there's also truth sayers. And it's like, okay, what does
Yes.
it mean to be a truth sayer? Because my understanding is that truth sayer is more just like a job description. Like if you're a truth
Yes.
sayer, you're a Bene Gesserit who works with a noble house, and your main role officially is that you help the nobles determine truth from lies. And I guess that probably means you have had more specific training around truth saying, but I think that all Bene Gesserit get some training in truth saying. I don't know. It's just another sort of slightly confusing title that is not fully explained.
Hmm. They also mentioned in this episode Shigawire, which was a nice little like deep Dune lore
Yeah.
reference. Shigawire. So that's
Yeah, they
interesting.
also mentioned like suspension slings as a way to
Yeah.
like look after the horse. I also thought it was adorable that Ori's horse was named Jet, like Jet Black, I guess. I don't know. I just thought it was really cute. Like it's a really good way of making Ori more sympathetic that it's like, Chula's about to murder this guy, but he's just kind of this like nice himbo who loves his horse and his family, and it's like, damn, it's really sad that this innocent guy gets murdered.
Yeah, you don't feel good about him getting killed. Like you don't root for Tula. Like, yay, kill them. I
Yeah.
mean, you understand why she's doing it because she believes in this feud between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, and she wants to, get vengeance for her brother. But you don't root for his death. It feels sad when it happens. Like everything about that scene feels sad.
I thought it was really effective when, like, it's in the morning and Ori and Chula are talking, and then Ori says, "Why is it so quiet?"
Yeah.
And then he steps outside and sees his family slaughtered. And I think, like, at the same time that that scene was sympathetic for Chula, it also was, I mean, on some level it was sympathetic for Chula, but it also was so such a horror story for Ori to like wake up in bed after just proposing to this girl and walking out to find his family murdered. I thought was really great.
And I do think that Tula should have eventually recognized, the futility of what she did, which I feel like would hurt her to an extent. Because my thing is, I do think that she was pregnant with Oris's kid. I don't
Yeah,
know what happened to that kid. I think that she either had to give it up or the kid was killed, or maybe it's that's the kid somehow related to Lyla. I don't know, but I do think that the reason she is so attached to Lyla is because of the fact that something happened to her original kid. Do you know
yeah,
what
I
I
agree.
mean? So she's latched on to Lyla, and I think that's related to whatever happened to this baby to some degree. Because I definitely think they some of these sex scenes have to mean something, right? You've shown us three sex scenes, so at least one of these has to result in a pregnancy. We've seen three.
That
So
is how babies are made. Spoilers, but that is how babies are made. Yeah,
true.
no, I sort of thought, well, maybe Lila is like Chula's granddaughter, but I agree. It makes more sense if Lila is like a surrogate, symbolic daughter to Chula, which does then raise the question of what happened to Chula's actual daughter. I mean, maybe Chula's actual daughter. I mean, it has to be someone who looks like her, but it would be interesting if it was like one of the older Bene Gesserit. It's like maybe her daughter is one of the people who just is at the Sisterhood still, but she
Yeah.
has to like act like they're not close, or she's working on some other planet, or there's all this other drama they could go through. But again, we're halfway through the season already, so it's tough.
I know that's what I keep going back to, 3 episodes, because I feel like these last 3 episodes really have to get to the plot. We really have to get things moving. Do you know what they're gonna do in the next 3 episodes? I don't usually look at the previews. I like to go in blind, but I'm curious to see like what exactly will be the composition of these next 3 episodes and what characters they're gonna focus on and what plots they're gonna start making leeway on. Because I mean, you gotta get moving right now. I
Yeah,
did see that it seems to focus on Yanez more in the next episode, I think.
yeah, and we also have heard that Harrow is meant to be a standout in this next episode. Yeah, I haven't seen the preview. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I am really curious. I mean, like, what do they have to show us? What have they set up that has to pay off soon? Like, I think that Kieran's rebellion against the Imperium uh, has to happen,
Yeah.
and so Kieran and Inez's relationship has to blow up, and I think that it ends with Inez joining the Sisterhood with like a new steely determination. I think the Constantine has to do something dumb. What? How about this? What if Emperor Yaviko, dies as a result of Kieran's rebellion, and Constantine becomes the new emperor? Or I guess it would be Yanez. I don't
It'd
know.
be
Maybe
Yanez,
something
I think.
dramatic like that.
I have thought that the Emperor was going to die the entire show. I don't
Yeah,
think it seems like they're setting Emperor Yaviko up to be manipulated and then killed.
yeah.
And
He
then
feels
the
a bit like a Ned
vacancy,
Stark.
yeah, like the vacancy that his throne leaves is going to cause all sorts of chaos, I think.
And maybe his wife, the Empress, might try and seize power. Like there are a lot of different characters who might want to seize control, which is interesting.
The
But
Empress is interesting to me because she definitely has like a motivation of her own and a will of her own that's distinct from Yaviko's.
yeah, and I keep waiting for this character, Francesca. Oh yeah, well, older Francesca to do something. I would like her to do something. But also like in terms of what else has to happen this season, I think we have to see a flashback of Desmond on Arrakis.
Yes.
Like to me, that's one of the most obvious things that has to happen is just to like give us a little bit more insight into what Desmond is and what he wants and what changed him. And they don't need to reveal everything, but I think it would make a lot of sense to give us a flashback to just give us a bit more, just the feeling of more insight into Desmond. And I think maybe Desmond will kill the Emperor. I don't know. Maybe that's what will
Who
happen.
knows? Desmond is definitely a wild card. I don't we're still not totally sure what he wants. We know the cryptic things that he said, but I mean, well, actually, we kind of do now because if we judging by what the Reverend Mother said that he wants what's best for the Imperium. He believes that's true. He believes that's true, and if he thought that killing Yaviko was what was best for the Imperium, then I have no doubt that he would do it. So that's why I think that Yaviko and the Empress are kind of playing with fire here, no pun intended,
Yeah.
because if he wants what's best for the Imperium, when he decides that you're not what's best for the Imperium, what do you think he's going to do? Like you're operating
Yeah.
based under the assumption that he thinks that you are what's best for the Imperium. So
Which is exactly the problem with the Sisterhood as well. I mean, the problem with the Sisterhood is that they're like, yeah, they want what's best, and that's great when they think that you are what's best. But when they decide that you are not for the greater good, that they'll murk you. So Desmond kind of is like the Sisterhood in that way, ironically. And yeah, like something else that Desmond could do is like kill Chula, I guess. I mean, like we know that like Desmond has said that his main goal is to destroy the Sisterhood. So I
yes,
think an obvious thing is for him to kill a Bene Gesserit who we care about. I guess like the relationship between Valia and Chula is so central that's probably going to continue through the series. So I guess Chula and Valia will both survive. So maybe Desmond will kill like Theodosia or I mean he's already killed Kasha, I suppose. So I don't know, but Desmond needs to like strike a blow that like feels like it matters.
like a blow that
Um,
hurts.
yeah, I mean maybe he'll kill one of the younger sisters. Although I suppose most of the sisters are going to be on Warlock 9. Maybe Desmond will go to Warlock 9 and will like lead an attack because I think that in some of the previews and trailers that I have seen, we see Desmond with a bunch of soldiers. So maybe Desmond will lead a military strike against the sisters on Warlock that might evoke what happens in the books with like the Emperor's forces attacking and disbanding the Sisterhood school on Rossack. Maybe something similar will happen.
There is a shot from the trailer that I think has to happen at some point of Valia cutting throats. So I'm wondering when she's gonna start cutting people's throats, because it looks
Yeah,
like she's just walking, slicing throats in the Bene Gesserit way.
as you do.
So,
Yeah, I
so
go on.
I was just gonna say there's lots hinting at a conflict that involves the Bene Gesserit sisters, and at several points in the show, we've seen them doing martial arts and training as fighters. So, on personally, I would love to see Bene Gesserit sisters fight or take on some
Yeah,
soldiers. I think that'd be cool. I think that'd be
yeah,
really cool.
yeah. I think that's got to happen because yeah, we haven't seen Bene Gesserit properly fight this series yet, and it would be cool to see Valia fight because like she is like like she's the best fighter in the Sisterhood in these Brian books. So it would be cool to see if old Valia still got it. You know, that'd be fun. I guess one thing that could happen at the end of this season is uh, Yaviko orders Desmond to go and wipe out the Sisterhood. And so at the end of the season, the big change is that the Sisterhood is now renegade and the Sisterhood is no longer supported or accepted by the Emperor. That could be something that happens.
That's actually a pretty cool idea because this is, 10,000 years before Paul Atreides. The Bene Gesserit have a long way to go before they fully establish themselves concretely in the Imperium. Seems like they've done a lot of work already, though, to be honest. Seems like they've gotten pretty far. They're already
Yeah.
like in the palace, but yeah, I get
Yeah, I
what
mean
you
that's
mean.
one of our prior criticisms, isn't it? That it feels like the Bene Gesserit has become very powerful and very influential and very trusted in a very short amount of time. Whereas the sense that you get in the books is that the Sisterhood very slowly grew influence over millennia. It seems quite fast here in this show.
And they also get kicked to the curb by the Emperor pretty fast, I would say. He's pretty quickly like, actually, screw you guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty quickly.
I guess I increasingly think that that's what's going to happen because like the big reveal at the end of this episode is that hey look the Sisterhood has a glowing AI robot computer called Anorule and it's forbidden and it's secret and like yes in the Brian Herbert books that this is inspired by there has already been a conflict where the Emperor found out about the sisters' computers and then attacked them and they were renegade but like this show has changed and made changes from the books a lot
They're just
so
moving it.
yeah, that they've played funny buggers with the timeline, but I think that that might be what the conflict is about in this show. Maybe it is about um, the Imperium finding out about the Bene Gesserit's secret computer, and then that causing the Imperium and Desmond to attack the Bene Gesserit. And I think that is probably the simplest answer of what the central conflict in this show is. And they're just replacing, um, they're just using Desmond, Travis Fimmel, as the main antagonist who is attacking the Sisterhood. I guess that could be what they're doing.
Actually, I think your instinct is right. I think your instinct might be like spot on, actually, because from the first episode they've mentioned the breeding index. We know how the Carinos feel about thinking technology, about thinking machines. So I feel like, and Desmond is already attempting to turn them against the Sisterhood. So if they get wind of the Sisterhood's breeding index computer, I think that could totally be what sets off this major conflict. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it almost seems like that's what's going to happen. Because one theme that has been consistent in this show is the theme of, technology bad or thinking machine bad. I mean, I feel like they've been kind of doing that the entire time. Well, at least the theme has been people's, or at least they've shown in this show that people have a strong negative reaction to thinking machines, is what I should say. So I
Yeah.
think that makes a lot of sense, that if this show is about how the Emperor, or if this show is about how challenges that the Bene Gesserit face with trying to maintain control over the Landsrat and the Emperor, then that could be a big plot point, because that would be a major way that they lose favor in the eyes of House Carino and the Emperor, is operating by using really forbidden technology. It's not just forbidden; it's like, we'll destroy your planet forbidden. It's like really forbidden. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's sort of the biggest setup things that they have done is that they've showed the Imperium hates and is scared of technology, like the Gecko robot thing, and the Sisterhood has a secret computer with that special key card. So yeah, that's got to pay off with the discovery of the computers and then them being attacked by the Emperor and Desmond. I think that makes sense. Um, so yeah, I'm very curious about the particular computer they've got. Like the fact that it's like a talking AI called Anorule is new. That's not in
yeah.
the Brian books. So I'm curious what's going on because like there are other named talking AI in that series, like Erasmus and Omnius, and so I
They're
wonder.
not nice.
Oh my God, they're not going to reveal that Anorule is secretly Omnius, are they?
Or like Erasmus. I mean, there's a whole thing where, in, isn't it the Mintac guy where he has a
Gilbertus.
copy of Erasmus,
Yeah,
basically, and he's like
yeah.
keeping him. So I hope not. Let's not do that. Let's not do that. Let's just have this be like another thinking machine thing.
And that's what happens in Brian Herbert's June 7, right? Like it don't Omnius and Erasmus come back
They do.
like like like
In
like 15,000 years later or something?
in the Brian Herbert books, the Marty and Daniel and Marty are really just Omnius and Erasmus. They're
Yeah,
not face
that
dancers.
is.
They're really just them. Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, no, I'm not going to rant about it, but yeah, I do not like that change.
I
My
mean,
God.
well, we've talked about it before, because it just goes
Yeah,
against what Frank Herbert set up so clearly. It's like, just from
yeah,
Heretics of Dune, we know that they're face dancers, like from the beginning of that. But anyway, I think
yeah,
we've covered it. We've been going for 2 hours. I think we're gonna wind down here. You got
yeah.
any
Sure.
final thoughts on this episode and just everything?
Yeah, I don't know. There's things I like, there's things I don't like. I'm hoping that it all comes together. I really like some of those theories you brought up, Quinn, about like what if Lyla is a descendant of Ori and Chula somehow? What if Lyla fits the prophecy about born in spice? What if Dorothea possesses Lyla? I think all of those are awesome ideas, and I hope that some of them pay off.
Mm-hmm. And last thing I'm going to say is that I'm still very optimistic about this show. Well, I'm still optimistic. I'm still in an optimistic state of mind about this show. I am excited about the next 3 episodes. I'm excited to watch them. I'm excited to review them, and I hope that they have a satisfying conclusion that most people like. And that's what I can say. This episode was my favorite. I'm gonna watch it again. I'm glad that a lot of you out there liked it. I'm glad that a lot of you out there appreciated the flashbacks and felt like they added to the story. Um, based on just like talking through all of it now, I do see how the flashbacks fill in a lot of space and add a lot of depth to the characters that we see and explain their motivations. So I get it more now for sure. And yeah, uh, I just want to say like be on the lookout for on my channel in the future. I'm working on like this huge video on the history of science fiction. It's gonna be long. We
Ooh.
start all the way back in the proto science fiction era, and we go all the way up to like the 1980s and cyberpunk and all that stuff. So that's coming. Future
Oh, hell
Quest
yeah.
ideas.
That sounds
Yeah,
great.
you got any big projects you're working on or anything you're working on? You want to tell that you want to tell the
Yeah.
people about?
Yeah, no, we're always working on things. I've got a whole bunch of different Dune videos coming. So yeah, I'll reveal when they're ready. But yeah, we've definitely got Dune stuff coming. So yeah, subscribe to Quinn's Ideas, Jabbar podcast, Nerd Cookies, AltshiftX. It's been a pleasure talking to you all.
And there will be links in the description that I'll put in after I end this live stream. Thanks so much, guys. Make sure you like the video too if you've been watching the whole time. Thanks, guys. Peace out.
Thanks, Quinn. See you guys.